There are moments in life when you feel the weight of a choice before you even make it. That Thursday night, when he first walked into Bellissimo, was exactly like that. I didn't know it yet, but my life was about to be split into two distinct chapters, before Dante Salvatore and after him. New York in October has a particular charm. The golden leaves blanket the sidewalks, the cool air bites your skin, and the city seems to pulse with a frenetic energy that never sleeps. I loved working the night shift at Bellissimo, a sophisticated Italian restaurant in the heart of Manhattan, where the city's elite gathered for dinners that cost more than my monthly rent. At 26, I was practically invisible in that world of luxury, just another waitress in a crisp uniform, a professional smile, and the ability to disappear when needed. It was exactly what I wanted. Invisibility meant safety. It meant nobody asked questions about my life, about why I worked double shifts, about why my hands trembled with fatigue as I set down plates of artisanal pasta on marble tables. The truth was, I supported Nonna Lucia, my grandmother who raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 7. She was all I had left, and her frail health consumed every penny I earned. But I didn't mind. She gave me love, stories, Italian songs that lulled me to sleep as a child. She taught me the language with the same care she used to prepare her homemade tomato sauces. Few people knew I spoke fluent Italian. I kept it a secret. A small piece of armor against arrogant clients who often made derogatory comments about the help, assuming I wouldn't understand if they muttered in another language. I let them think that. It was easier that way. That Thursday, the restaurant was buzzing with its usual commotion. Executives closing deals, couples on romantic dates, tourists dazzled by the decor that mimicked a Tuscan villa. I moved between tables with mechanical efficiency. My mind split between orders and the hospital bill I needed to pay by the end of the month. That's when he walked in. Dante Salvatore didn't walk. He commanded the space. Tall, broad shoulders encased in a black suit that likely cost more than my used car. He crossed the main dining room with a presence that made conversations lower in volume. Dark, perfectly coiffed hair, a strong jawline, and eyes. God, those eyes. Dark as smoldering coal, penetrating in a way that made you feel like he saw every secret you were hiding. 3 men followed him, all impeccably dressed, all exuding the same air of contained danger. I recognized the type immediately. They weren't ordinary businessmen. There was something predatory about them. A domesticated violence that pulsed just beneath the polished surface. Marco, the maitre d', practically ran to greet them, leading them to the private table in the back of the restaurant. That table was rarely used, reserved only for special or dangerous clients. My colleague Jennifer passed me with wide eyes. "Did you see who just arrived? Dante Salvatore. My God, Sienna, that man is..." She fanned herself dramatically. I knew the name. Everyone in New York did, even if they only whispered it. The Salvatores were one of the city's most powerful families. And when I say family, I don't mean the kind that gathers for Thanksgiving dinners. Mafia, power, money-stained crimson. "He's dangerous," I muttered, organizing my tray. Jennifer laughed. The best ones always are. I didn't share her enthusiasm. Men like Dante Salvatore were storms, beautiful from a distance, destructive up close. And I had learned early on to protect myself from storms. The universe, however, had other plans. Marco approached me with a nervous smile. "Sienna, you'll be taking the private table tonight." My stomach dropped. "Me? Why?" "Sophia called in sick. You're next on the rotation." He lowered his voice. "And be careful. Mr. Salvatore is a very important client. Extremely important." The message was clear. Don't make mistakes. I took a deep breath, adjusted my uniform, and walked toward the private table. Each step seemed to carry a strange weight, as if I were approaching something inevitable. When I entered the room, separated by red velvet curtains, all eyes turned to me, but it was his gaze that immobilized me. Dante Salvatore watched me with an intensity that made my skin tingle, as if he were cataloging me, memorizing every detail. "Good evening, gentlemen," I said, with my most impeccable professional smile. "My name is Sienna, and I'll be your server tonight. May I start you off with something to drink?" Dante didn't answer immediately. He just kept watching me, his head tilted slightly, like a predator studying unexpected prey. Finally, a slow smile curved his lips, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes but still held something interested. "Barolo," he said, his voice deep and slightly husky. "The best you have." I jotted down the order, keeping my eyes on the notepad, refusing to give in to the temptation of meeting that gaze again. The other men placed their orders, expensive whiskeys, imported mineral water, and I retreated quickly. As I prepared the drinks at the bar, my hands trembled slightly. Annoying. I didn't tremble, not for clients, no matter how powerful or attractive they were. When I returned with the tray, the men were in an intense conversation. I carefully placed each drink, starting with the guests and finally setting the glass of Barolo in front of Dante. That's when he spoke, his attention seemingly still on the man to his right, an older gentleman with gray hair who, I would later find out, was Marco, his consigliere. "Finally, someone with grace in this place," Dante said in perfect Italian, his voice carrying a tone of genuine admiration. Eyes like hers could make a man forget who he is. My body froze, every muscle locked for a split second before I could regain control of my reaction. He wasn't talking to me, he was talking about me, believing I wouldn't understand. His words were unexpected. Not the vulgar comment I feared, but something almost vulnerable, dangerously vulnerable. I finished serving and turned to leave, but something inside me, maybe pride, maybe stupidity, refused to let it pass. When I returned minutes later with the menus, I leaned in slightly and replied in fluent Italian, my voice low but clear. "And men like you make women remember exactly who they should avoid." The silence that followed was absolute. Marco's eyes went wide, his glass stopping midway to his mouth. The other men exchanged nervous glances. But Dante leaned back slowly in his chair, that dangerous smile widening, his eyes glinting with something that looked like amusement, surprise, and something darker that I couldn't name. "Interesting," he murmured in Italian, his eyes fixed on mine. "Very interesting." I placed the menus down and retreated, my heart pounding, my skin burning under the weight of that gaze. I didn't know it yet, but that exchange of words in Italian, that moment of defiance disguised as a polite response, had sealed my fate. Dante Salvatore was not a man who forgot surprises, and I had just become the most dangerous surprise of his life. Dante Salvatore became a constant in my life like the tide, inevitable, persistent, impossible to ignore. He started showing up at Bellissimo 3 times a week, always the same private table, always requesting me as his server. Marco, the maitre d' would inform me with a nervous smile that Mr. Salvatore specifically requested your services, as if I had a choice in the matter. I didn't. The first few weeks were an elaborate game of verbal chess. Dante now spoke to me exclusively in Italian, no longer the whispered comments I wasn't supposed to understand, but direct conversations, loaded with double meanings and subtle provocations. "Do you have family in Italy?" he asked one night, savoring his wine with that studied calm that made every movement seem deliberate. "My grandmother came from Naples," I replied, maintaining my professional tone as I set down his plate of ossobuco. "She taught me the language, Neapolitan." His lips curved in approval. "That explains the fire in your eyes. And you? Where does your family come from?" "Sicily, a land of secrets and eternal loyalties." He paused, his dark eyes studying me. "Or deadly betrayals. Depends on who you ask." The warning was clear between the lines. This man lived in a world where trust was a rare currency, and mistakes meant permanent consequences. I should have kept my distance. I should have asked to be moved to a different table, invented any excuse. But there was something magnetic about Dante Salvatore, not just his devastating good looks or the power that radiated from him like embers. It was the contradiction. The way he could make a brutal business comment to his associates and the next moment gently ask if my grandmother was well, as if he genuinely cared about the answer. And maybe he did. That possibility was the most dangerous of all. One night, 3 weeks after that first conversation in Italian, everything changed. I was having the worst day of my life. The hospital had called that morning to inform me that Nonna Lucia needed urgent heart surgery. The cost was astronomical, figures that would take me years to save, even working double shifts. My insurance would only cover a miserable fraction. I spent the entire day in silent panic, my mind racing in desperate circles, trying to calculate impossible loans, the sale of assets I didn't own. When I arrived at Bellissimo for the night shift, my eyes were red from crying on the subway. Naturally, Dante was there. I served his table on autopilot, barely able to hold the weight of the tray, my hands visibly shaking. When I set down his wine glass, a little of the red liquid spilled onto the white tablecloth. "I'm sorry," I murmured in Italian, quickly wiping the spot. Dante didn't respond. When I looked up, he was watching me with a different intensity, not the usual predatory interest, but something closer to concern. "What happened?" he asked softly, out of earshot of his men. "Nothing. I'm sorry about the Sienna." My name in his voice was a command. What happened? Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the desperation. Maybe I just needed someone, anyone, to acknowledge that I was drowning. My defenses crumbled. My grandmother, she needs surgery. I can't afford it. My voice broke on the last word. Dante was silent for a long moment, his eyes searching my face as if reading a complex text. Finally, he nodded once, brief and decisive. "Finish your shift. I'll be waiting outside." It wasn't a request. When I stepped out of the restaurant's side entrance at 11 o'clock that night, Dante was leaning against a sleek black car, his hands in the pockets of his dark wool overcoat. The street was empty, lit only by the streetlights that cast an orange glow on the nightly mist. I approached slowly, my purse clutched to my chest like an inadequate shield. "You don't have to," I started. He raised a hand, silencing me, and pulled a white envelope from the inside pocket of his jacket. He held it out to me. I looked at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. "I can't accept that." "You can, and you will." His voice was firm, with no room for negotiation. "It's not charity, Sienna. Consider it an investment." "An investment in what?" Something dangerous glinted in his eyes. Not a threat, but a promise. "In the future. You never know when paths will cross again." Before I could protest, he placed the envelope in my hands, closing my fingers around it with his own. The touch was brief, but it burned like a brand. "Save your grandmother," he said softly. "Some things are worth more than pride." And then he got into the car and disappeared into the night, leaving me alone on the sidewalk with an envelope full of money and a million questions. The envelope contained exactly the amount I needed for the surgery. No more, no less. How did he know? I spent 3 days in moral agony. Accepting money from Dante Salvatore meant putting myself in debt to a man whose very existence was built on favors collected. But the alternative was watching Nonna Lucia die. There was no real choice. I paid for the surgery. It was a success. And when Dante returned to Bellissimo the following week, I was waiting for him. "Thank you," I said simply, setting down his wine glass with steady hands. "I'll pay you back. Every cent." He took a sip of the wine, watching me over the rim of the glass. "I don't want your money, Sienna." "Then what do you want?" The smile that curved his lips was slow, dangerous, and utterly devastating. "Have dinner with me tomorrow night. A real restaurant, not as a client and a waitress, but as..." He paused, choosing the word carefully. "Equals." My heart raced. Every survival instinct screamed to refuse. But the truth was, I wanted to accept. I desperately wanted to understand who this man was. The ruthless mobster everyone feared, or the man who saved my grandmother without asking for anything in return. "Just one dinner," I said finally. His eyes gleamed with victory. "Just one?" We both knew it was a lie. The restaurant was Le Cirque, so exclusive it had a months-long waiting list. Naturally, Dante had a reserved table. He picked me up from my apartment in his private car, wearing a dark gray suit that accentuated his broad shoulders. When he saw me in my simple navy blue dress, the most elegant I owned, his eyes lingered in a way that made my face flush. "Beautiful," he murmured, opening the car door for me. The dinner was surprising. We talked about art. He collected Renaissance paintings. About music, his mother had been a pianist before she married his father. About books, we both loved Dante Alighieri, although he joked that his parents named him after the poet without realizing the irony of naming the future Mafia boss after the man who described the circles of hell. Perhaps they knew exactly what they were doing, I teased, tasting the saffron risotto. He laughed, a genuine laugh, not the controlled sound he used with his men. Maybe. My life has certainly had its descents into hell. And have you found your Beatrice? I asked, referencing Dante Alighieri's muse. His eyes met mine, and something intense passed between us, an electric current that made the air thick. Perhaps I'm looking at her now. My heart stopped. It restarted at a frantic pace. Dante. My voice was a warning whisper. Sienna. He reached his hand across the table, his fingers brushing against mine. I know what you think of me, what you've heard, and most of it is true. I'm not a good man. I've done things that would make you run screaming if you knew the details. His voice dropped, becoming hoarse. But with you, you make me want to be different, better. You can't change who you are, I replied, but I didn't pull my hand away. No. But I can choose who I want to protect, who I want by my side. His fingers intertwined with mine. And I choose you. It was in that moment, under the soft lights of Le Cirque, with our hands entwined on the white tablecloth, that I understood the terrible, inevitable truth. I was falling in love with Dante Salvatore, and there was absolutely nothing I could do to save myself. The next 2 months were like living in two worlds simultaneously. By day, I was still Sienna Marcello, the waitress at Bellissimo, taking care of Nonna Lucia during my time off, paying bills, living my modest life in a one-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn. By night, I belonged to another universe entirely. Dante took me to places I only knew from magazines, Broadway theaters with private boxes, Michelin-starred restaurants where chefs personally came out to greet him, art galleries after hours where we walked alone among masterpieces. He never pressured me for more than I was willing to give, but the tension between us grew like an inevitable tide. Each lingering look, each accidental touch that lasted a second too long, each conversation in Italian that seemed to create a bubble of intimacy around us, protecting us from the outside world. I learned things about Dante that no one else knew, that he visited his mother's grave every Monday morning, leaving white roses, that he secretly sponsored a school in his old neighborhood, ensuring poor children had a quality education, that he had nightmares, waking up in a cold sweat, tormented by the faces of men he had dealt with. He didn't hide his nature from me. He didn't pretend to be someone he wasn't. My world is made of impossible choices, he told me one night as we walked across the Brooklyn Bridge, the city sparkling like a constellation around us. Loyalty or survival, justice or revenge. Every decision I make has consequences that weigh like lead. Do you ever regret it? I asked, watching his profile against the city lights. He was silent for a long moment. Regret is a luxury men like me can't afford. Regret paralyzes you, and paralysis gets you killed. Then he turned to me, his eyes vulnerable in a way that broke my heart. But if I could go back in time, I would choose a different path, a path where I didn't have to have blood on my hands to protect those I love. And who do you love? He raised his hand, his fingers tracing my jawline with a delicacy that was in absurd contrast to everything he was. My mother, my loyal men, and... He hesitated, as if the words were too difficult. And a stubborn woman with brown eyes who challenges me in Italian and makes me believe in redemption. My heart raced. Dante, I know it's crazy. I know you deserve better, someone whose hands are clean. His voice was husky, desperate. But I'm too selfish to let you go. I should have pulled away. I should have set boundaries. But instead, I leaned in and kissed him, our first time, right there on the bridge, with the cold November wind whipping around us. The kiss started soft, tentative, but quickly deepened into something hungry, desperate. His hands pulled me against him, and I felt every rigid muscle in his body, the contained strength that vibrated beneath his fierce control. When we broke apart, we were both breathless. Sienna, he whispered against my lips, his forehead resting against mine. If you stay with me, there's no turning back. My world will consume you, it will mark you, it will change you. Maybe I want to be changed, I replied, surprising myself with the brutal truth of those words. Something wild gleamed in his eyes. Possession, desire, fear. Then be mine, truly mine. And I wanted to. God, how I wanted to. But the universe, as always, had other plans. The invitation arrived a week later, a black envelope with golden edges, delivered personally by one of Dante's men. It was for the annual Salvatore Ball, the most exclusive and dangerous event on the New York Mafia's social calendar. All the families attended, a temporary truce, where enemies dined together under the guise of civility, while planning future moves like pieces on a deadly chessboard. "Come with me," Dante asked when he called me that night. His voice carried something I had never heard before, uncertainty. "I know what I'm asking. I know that appearing by my side means everyone will know. They'll mark you as mine. They'll see you as a weakness they can exploit," he paused. "But I want you there. I need you there. By my side." My mouth went dry. Accepting meant crossing the final line. There would be no more separation between my ordinary life and his world. I would be seen, catalogued, analyzed by people who made manipulation and violence their professions. "Dante, if you say no, I understand. I swear I understand. And it won't change anything between us." But I could hear the lie in that last sentence. It would change everything. It would be proof that I wasn't willing to truly stand by his side. I closed my eyes, thinking of Nonna Lucia, of the quiet life I had always wanted, of the safety I valued above all else. And then I thought of Dante, of his eyes when he looked at me, of the way he held my hand as if it were the only thing keeping him anchored to humanity, of the kiss on the bridge that still burned on my lips. "Send me the dress," I said finally. "I'll be there." The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. Then his voice so low I barely heard it. "Thank you." 2 words that carried the weight of a world. The dress arrived 2 days before the ball, blood red, pure silk, with a backline that went down to the base of my spine. It was the kind of dress that left no room for subtlety. It was a statement, possession, a promise. When I put it on the night of the ball, I barely recognized the woman in the mirror. I looked like a version of myself from a parallel universe. Powerful, dangerous, belonging in that world of shadows. Dante picked me up personally, and when he saw me, his reaction was worth every second of hesitation I had. He froze in the doorway, his eyes traveling over every inch of me with a hunger so intense it made my skin burn. "You're going to take me to hell tonight," he murmured, taking my hand and kissing it slowly. "It's not fair for me to go alone," I replied, trying to lighten the tension with humor. He didn't smile. Instead, he pulled me against him, his hands firm on my waist. "Last chance to change your mind, Sienna. Once we cross those doors, there's no more hiding what you are to me." "And what am I to you?" His eyes met mine, smoldering coal. "Everything." The Rothschild mansion, where the ball was held, looked like it was straight out of a movie. Crystal chandeliers that dripped golden light, Italian marble that reflected the glow of hundreds of candles, an orchestra playing Vivaldi, while people dressed in fortunes circulated with glasses of champagne. But beneath the superficial elegance, danger pulsed. I could feel it in the gazes that followed us as we entered, calculating, assessing, some openly hostile. I recognized faces from newspapers, men accused but never convicted, women covered in jewels that probably cost lives. Dante kept his possessive hand on the small of my back, guiding me through the crowd. He introduced me with carefully chosen words. "Sienna, my companion." Not girlfriend, not friend. Companion, a word that in that world carried the weight of commitment, of protection, of ownership. I met faces of his empire, Marco, the consigliere, who greeted me with respectful caution but eyes that measured me incessantly. Lorenzo, his head of security, a huge man with hands that seemed capable of breaking bones effortlessly. And then, "Dante, darling," the voice was honey poured over broken glass, sweet on the surface, cutting underneath. I turned and saw the most stunning woman I had ever encountered. Tall, with perfect black waves, an emerald dress that hugged every curve, she approached Dante with a familiarity that made my stomach clench. "Valentina," Dante said. His voice carefully neutral. She smiled, a predator's smile. "How long has it been?" 3 months? Her eyes finally found me, assessing me from head to toe with thinly veiled disdain. "And who is this?" Sienna Marcello, Dante replied, his hand tightening protectively on my waist. My companion. Something dangerous glinted in Valentina's eyes. How charming. You must tell me, darling, how you managed to capture our elusive Dante's attention. He's usually so hard to pin down. The poison was clear. This woman had shared Dante's bed. Maybe more. And she was not happy about being replaced. Perhaps he was just waiting for someone worth pinning down, I replied in soft Italian, maintaining my smile. Valentina blinked, surprised by my fluency. Then her smile widened, but it didn't reach her eyes. How witty. Let's see how long that wit lasts. And with that, she walked away, leaving an implicit threat in the air. Dante pulled me closer, his voice low in my ear. Ignore her. Valentina is your past? Dead past. Buried. It means nothing. I wanted to believe it. But the way she looked at him, as if she still had rights, still owned parts of him, planted seeds of doubt that I couldn't pluck out. The night continued in a blur of introductions, tense conversations disguised as pleasantries, and the growing feeling that I was a pawn in a cage of hungry lions. And then, on the terrace, Valentina found me alone. May I have a moment? She asked, her voice now stripped of its fake sweetness. I should have refused. I should have gone back inside. But pride, damn pride, made me stay. What do you want? She lit a cigarette, slowly blowing out the smoke. To give you some advice, woman to woman. Her eyes studied me. Do you think you're special? That Dante actually cares? She laughed, a bitter sound. Darling, you're number 23, I counted. He does this, finds some innocent girl, seduces her with attention and gifts, makes her feel unique. And then, she snapped her fingers. He gets tired, moves on to the next. You're lying, am I? She took a step closer. Ask him about Sophia, or Isabella, or Maria. They all thought they were different too. Her eyes gleamed with malice. The difference is you're naive enough to actually believe his lies. Each word was a blade, cutting at the foundations of my certainty. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm saving you from what comes next. When he's done with you, when he discards you like... She paused, smiling cruelly. He's not gentle with his broken toys, Sienna, and you will break. They all do. Valentina's words echoed in my mind like a funeral bell as I returned to the ballroom. Dante found me immediately, his eyes searching my face with instant concern. What happened? You're pale. Nothing, I lied, forcing a smile. Just needed some air. He didn't believe it, I saw it in his eyes. But before he could press me, Marco appeared at his side, whispering something urgent in his ear. Dante's face hardened, transforming into the stone mask he wore when dealing with business. I need to handle something, he said, turning to me. Stay here. Lorenzo will keep an eye on you. Dante. But he had already disappeared into the crowd, Marco and 2 other men following him like shadows. I stood there, alone in a sea of dangerous strangers, Valentina's words corroding my confidence like acid. Number 23. Broken toys. Lies. Had it all been an elaborate manipulation? The dinners, the conversations about art and philosophy, the vulnerability he showed, all a rehearsed performance he put on for every foolish woman who was gullible enough to believe? No, it couldn't be. What we felt was real. It had to be. But doubt, once planted, grew like a poisonous weed. 2 hours dragged by. Dante didn't return. Valentina circulated the room, casting glances of fake sympathy that made my blood boil. Lorenzo remained nearby, a silent bodyguard, but his presence only reinforced how out of place I was in this world. Finally, unable to bear it anymore, I went to look for Dante. I found him in a library at the back of the mansion, an opulent room with floor-to-ceiling mahogany bookshelves, a crackling fireplace, and a group of men smoking expensive cigars. Dante was among them, talking in low tones with a man I recognized from newspaper photographs, Alexei Volkov, head of the Russian Mafia. I should have turned and left, but something in the tone of their conversation made me hesitate in the shadows of the hallway. The terms are simple, Alexei was saying in a thick English accent. You give us access to the ports. We ensure your businesses in Eastern Europe remain uninterrupted. And if I refuse, Dante asked, His voice dangerously calm. Alexei smiled, a shark's smile. Then we'll find that accidents happen, especially to people you care about. The air in the room froze. Dante's men moved imperceptibly, their hands near concealed weapons, but Dante raised a hand, stopping them. Are you threatening me, Alexei? I'm establishing realities, my friend. In our world, loyalties are fluid. You should know that. Alexei blew out cigar smoke. I heard you have a new companion, a beautiful woman. It would be a shame if something happened to her. My heart stopped. The transformation in Dante was instant and terrifying. 1 second he was leaning calmly in his chair. The next, he had Alexei by the throat, the Russian's smaller body pressed against the bookshelf with brutal force. Listen closely, Dante snarled, every word dripping with lethal menace. You can threaten my businesses. You can try to play your pathetic power games. But if you or any of your men so much as go near her, if she feels 1 second of fear because of you, I will hunt you down and everyone you love. I will erase your bloodline from the face of the earth. Alexei choked, his face turning red. His men moved, but Dante's men were faster, guns appearing as if by magic. Understood, Dante tightened his grip. Yes, Alexei managed to gasp. Dante released him with disgust, the Russian falling to the floor, coughing. Get out of my sight, and consider our negotiations terminated. Alexei stumbled to his feet, composing himself with wounded dignity. You'll regret this, Salvatore. Nobody rejects the Volkovs and lives to. Get out! The word was a final order, backed by a dozen pointed guns. Alexei and his men left quickly, passing so close to me in the hallway that I smelled the cigar, smoke and anger on their clothes. I entered the library, my legs trembling. Dante was standing with his back to the door, his hands resting on the mantelpiece, his posture rigid with contained tension. Dante? He turned abruptly, his eyes widening when he saw me. How much did you hear? Enough. I stepped into the room, Lorenzo closing the door behind me, giving us privacy. He threatened you, he threatened me. And I handled it. Dante ran his hands through his hair, messing up his perfect coiffure. He won't touch you, no one will. You just destroyed an alliance because of me. I protected what's mine. His voice echoed in the room, raw and fierce. Then, softer. You are mine, Sienna. Mine to protect, mine to... He stopped, as if the next words were too difficult. To discard when you get tired? The silence that followed was absolute. Dante stared at me as if I had slapped him. What? The floodgates opened. All the doubt, all the fear, all the insecurity Valentina had planted gushed from me in a torrent. Valentina told me everything. About the other women. Sophia, Isabella, Maria. All the ones you seduced with the same routine, the same pretty words, making each one feel special before you. My voice broke. Am I just number 23, Dante? Just another distraction until you get bored and move on to the next. The pain that crossed his face was visceral. You believe that? You really believe that? I don't know what to believe anymore. Tears burned in my eyes, but I forced them back. Your world is made of lies and manipulation. How do I know I'm not just another one? Dante crossed the distance between us in 3 strides, his hands holding my face with a desperate intensity. Look at me, he commanded, his voice husky. Look into my eyes and tell me if you see lies. I forced myself to meet his gaze. What I saw there broke me. Raw pain, exposed vulnerability, and something so intense it made my heart stumble. There have been other women, I won't lie about that, but none of them meant anything. They were transactions, Sienna. Temporary company in a world that doesn't allow for real connections. His thumbs traced my cheeks. Do you think I would bring someone unimportant to the ball? That I would let my empire see my weakness? Because that's what you are, my only real weakness. The only person in this world who could completely destroy me if she wanted to. Dante, I love you. The words came out like a confession torn from him. I don't know when it started. Maybe that first night when you answered me in Italian, showing me you weren't afraid. Maybe when I saw you crying but still working, strong despite being broken. Maybe it was gradual, each conversation adding another layer until I woke up one day and realized you had become the most important thing in my life. His voice broke. I love you, and it terrifies me because now I have something to lose. I have you to lose. The tears finally fell, hot on my face. How can I believe you? How can I know it's real when your entire world is built on illusions? Because I'm here, he said fiercely, on my knees before you, metaphorically speaking, begging you to believe me. Because I just made enemies of the Russians for your sake. Because every decision I make now is filtered through a single question. Will this keep her safe? He pressed his forehead against mine, our noses touching, our breaths mingling. You want proof? Leave this city with me, tomorrow. Let's go to Italy, to Naples, where your grandmother was born. I'll show you where my family came from, the places I've hidden from everyone. I'll open every dark part of me and let you decide if you still want me. And your empire. To hell with the empire, he said, with a ferocity that surprised me. I can rebuild businesses. I can make new deals. But you? His voice was so low I barely heard it. You are irreplaceable. I looked at this man, this powerful, dangerous mobster who ruled an empire of shadows, and I saw only the man, vulnerable, terrified, in love. I took my broken heart and all my doubts and made a choice. I love you too, I whispered in Italian. God help me, I love you. The sound that escaped him was half groan, half relief. He kissed me then, desperate, hungry, as if I were oxygen and he were drowning. I kissed him back with equal ferocity, years of loneliness and fear melting under the heat between us. When we broke apart, both of us trembling, he held my face as if I were the most precious thing in the world. Be mine, he whispered, truly, completely mine. Not just today, but every day to come. I already am, I replied, and it was true. I had given my heart to this dangerous man, and there was no getting it back now. We left the ball together, fingers intertwined, ignoring the stares and whispers. Valentina watched us go, her face a mask of thinly veiled rage. But I no longer cared. She was the past. I was the present. And maybe, if we were lucky, the future too. Dante took me to his penthouse, a surprisingly personal space with a panoramic view of Manhattan. Italian books lined the shelves. Old family photographs adorned the walls, and a black grand piano occupied a corner, a silent witness to the mother he had lost. No one comes here, he said, watching me explore. It's my sanctuary, the only place I can just be me. And you brought me here, because I want you to know all my places, all my secrets. He approached, his hands finding my waist. No more masks, no more games. I looked into his eyes and saw the truth, raw, scary, beautiful. Then show me, I whispered. Show me who you really are. And he showed me. That night, we gave ourselves to each other completely, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. Every touch was a promise. Every kiss was a vow. Every whisper in Italian was a confession of truths we could never say in English. When we finally fell asleep intertwined under silk sheets, the city pulsing through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I knew I had crossed a point of no return. I belonged to Dante Salvatore, and he belonged to me. No matter how dangerous, no matter how many enemies, no matter that the future was uncertain, we chose each other. And that choice would change everything. I woke to the golden light of dawn flooding the penthouse, turning Manhattan into a mosaic of glass and gold. For a moment, disoriented, I didn't recognize where I was. Then I felt Dante's arm around my waist, his warm body against my back, and the memory of the night before returned in waves that flushed my face. Good morning, his husky voice murmured in my ear, followed by a soft kiss on the curve of my neck. I turned to face him. In the daylight, without the impeccable suit and the mask of authority, Dante looked younger, almost vulnerable. Scars I had traced with curious fingers during the night were now visible. One on his right shoulder, another crossing his ribs. Stories of violence written on his skin. Studying me, he observed, a smile touching his lips. Memorizing, I corrected, my hand resting on the scar on his ribs. This one. His expression darkened slightly. Knife wound, 3 years ago, an internal betrayal that almost cost me my life. And this one, I touched his shoulder. Gunshot wound, 6 years ago, a turf war with the Irish. Each scar was a brutal reminder of the world he lived in, a world I had chosen to enter. Do you regret it? Dante asked softly, reading the concern on my face. Last night? Us? No, I replied honestly. But I'm scared. Of me? Of what happens now? Of what it means for my life, for Nonna Lucia, for... I stopped, unable to articulate the fear that gnawed at my insides. Dante sat up, pulling me with him, the sheets falling to our waists. His expression was serious, the Mafia boss momentarily replacing the lover. You need to understand something, Sienna. After what happened last night, me rejecting the Russians, making it clear to everyone at the ball that you're not just a pastime. You became a target. He held my face, forcing me to meet his eyes. My enemies will try to use you against me. They'll look for weaknesses. They'll try to hurt you to wound me. My stomach clenched. So what do we do? I protect you. With every resource I have, every man loyal to me, every connection I've built. His jaw hardened. But you have to let me do it. You have to trust me, even when my decisions seem extreme. Before I could answer, Dante's phone vibrated on the nightstand. He ignored it at first, but it kept vibrating, insistent, urgent. With a frustrated sigh, he answered. This better be important. I watched as his expression changed, from irritation to alertness, then to something close to controlled fury. When? Pause. How many men? Another pause. Longer. No. Keep him under surveillance, but don't approach yet. I'm on my way. He hung up, already getting out of bed, moving with military efficiency as he pulled on pants. What happened? Dante hesitated, clearly debating how much to tell me. Finally, Marco, my consigliere, he pulled on a shirt. He was seen meeting with Volkov's associates this morning, without my authorization. The world seemed to tilt. You think he's betraying me, dealing behind my back? Dante buttoned his shirt with abrupt movements. I hope not. Marco's been with me for 15 years. But in my world, loyalty has an expiration date when ambition enters the equation. I got out of bed, wrapping the sheet around my body. What are you going to do? He approached me, kissing my forehead softly, a stark contrast to the coldness in his eyes. What I need to do? Protect what's mine. Dante, stay here. Lorenzo will be here in 20 minutes to stay with you. Don't open the door for anyone else. Understood? Fear rose in my throat like bile. Will you come back? Something broke in his expression, a flash of vulnerability behind the armor. Always, I always come back for you. And then he was gone, leaving me alone in the penthouse as the city woke up below, indifferent to the deadly games being played in its shadows. Lorenzo arrived as promised, a huge, silent man who positioned himself at the door like a sentry. I dressed in clothes Dante had provided, tailored pants and a silk blouse that probably cost more than my monthly salary. The hours dragged on. I tried to read one of Dante's books, but the words danced without forming meaning. I tried to watch television, but every news story about violence in the city made my heart race. Finally, unable to bear it anymore, I approached Lorenzo. What's happening? Where is Dante? Lorenzo stared at me with an impenetrable expression. Handling business matters. Business matters, I repeated bitterly. Is that what you call it? Something that could have been sympathy gleamed in his eyes. Ms. Marcello, the less you know about certain aspects of Mr. Salvatore's life, the better you'll sleep at night. What if I don't want to sleep in ignorance? Then you'll find that some knowledge has a price that isn't worth paying. Before I could reply, Lorenzo's phone rang. He answered, his expression remaining neutral as he listened. Then, hanging up, grab your coat, we're leaving. Where to? Mr. Salvatore requested your presence. My blood ran cold. Where? A warehouse in Red Hook. He wants you to see something. The drive was made in tense silence. The car, a black SUV with tinted windows, drove through Brooklyn while my mind raced through scenarios, each more terrifying than the last. The warehouse was an abandoned structure near the ports, surrounded by rusty containers and silent cranes. 3 cars were already parked outside, men in suits standing guard. Lorenzo escorted me inside. The interior was vast and dark, lit only by hanging, industrial lights, and in the center, tied to a chair, was Marco. His face was bruised, his lips split, and eyes swelling shut. But what froze me wasn't his condition. It was the expression of absolute terror as Dante approached him, moving with the lethal grace of a predator. Sienna. Dante turned when he heard my footsteps, his expression impossible to read. You didn't have to come. You requested my presence. I said Lorenzo should give you the option, not force you. He studied my face. This is going to get ugly. You can wait outside. Every fiber of my being screamed to take the easy way out, to run from that place, from that moment, from the brutal truth about who Dante really was when the masks fell. But I had chosen this man, chosen his world. If I was going to stay, I had to see everything, even the parts that would break me. I'll stay, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Something passed through Dante's eyes, respect mixed with regret. He nodded once, then turned his attention back to Marco. Last chance, old friend, Dante said in Italian, his voice dangerously calm. Tell me the truth, and maybe we can find a solution that doesn't end in bloodshed. Marco spat blood on the floor. You're weak, Dante. That woman has made you weak. The organization needs a strong leader, not a man distracted by. The punch was so fast I barely saw Dante move. Marco cried out, the chair nearly toppling over. Watch your next words, Dante warned, his voice like ice. You were dealing with the Volkovs. Planning what? A coup? To hand me over? Planning to save the empire you're destroying, Marco screamed. You rejected a lucrative alliance because of her, made enemies we didn't need to have, all because you can't keep your head out of some waitress's bed. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy with impending violence. Dante leaned in, his face inches from Marco's. She, he said softly, each word sharp as a blade, is worth more than 10 empires. She's worth more than every dirty deal, every rotten alliance, every compromise I've made with my soul. He straightened up, pulling something from his waistband. A gun, black and deadly. You betrayed my trust. You conspired with my enemies. And worse, you insulted the woman I love. My heart stopped. The world narrowed to this moment, Dante with a gun in his hand, Marco tied up and bleeding, and me, a witness to something I could never unsee. Dante, I whispered, my voice cracking. He looked at me over his shoulder. Our eyes met, mine pleading, his asking for understanding. You said you wanted to see everything, he said softly. This is my world, Sienna. This is who I am when betrayal threatens everything I protect. And then, with a calculated coldness that chilled me to the bone, Dante Salvatore executed his consigliere. The sound of the gunshot echoed in the warehouse like thunder. And I, finally, completely understood the man I had fallen in love with. I don't remember how I got out of the warehouse. One moment I was there, witnessing the instant Dante pulled the trigger, the sound of the shot tearing through the air. The next, Lorenzo was guiding me outside, his arm firm around my shoulders as my legs refused to cooperate. The cold November air hit me like a slap, clearing the fog of shock that enveloped my mind. Doubling over, I vomited on the cracked asphalt, my body violently rejecting what my mind had just processed. Breathe, Lorenzo instructed, his voice surprisingly gentle. Just breathe. But how could I breathe when the world had tilted on its axis? When the man I loved, who had held me with such tenderness just hours before, had just taken a life with the same coldness as someone extinguishing a candle? Take her home, Dante's voice sounded behind me. I turned and saw him standing at the warehouse entrance, the gun already put away, removing black gloves from his hands. There was no visible blood on him, no physical evidence of what he had just done. Just those dark eyes watching me with an intensity that hurt. No, I managed to say, my voice hoarse. I'm not going anywhere with you. Something broke in his expression. Sienna. You killed him, I whispered, the horror finally finding words. Without a trial, without a second chance, how do you just... He betrayed me, Dante said, his voice carefully controlled as he approached. He was conspiring with our enemies, planning to use you as a bargaining chip to force me to give up power. Then you hand him over to the authorities. You expose him, exile him, anything but... I couldn't finish the sentence. To the authorities? A bitter laugh escaped him. Sienna, half the authorities in this city are in my pocket. And in the other half that isn't. Marco had his own connections. He would have come back to destroy me. So that's how it works in your world? Someone betrays you and you just kill them? Yes. The word was said without hesitation, without remorse. In my world, betrayal has only one end. Because if I show mercy once, if I allow betrayal to go unpunished, every man who works for me will question my strength. And weakness in the empire I've built means annihilation. I took a step back, wrapping my arms around my body as if I could protect myself from him. Who are you? The man who held me last night, who whispered promises of love, or this cold stranger who takes lives without blinking? Dante stopped, the pain crossing his face so intensely it almost made me take back my words. Almost. I'm both, he said finally, his voice broken. I'm the man who loves you more than anything in this world. And I'm the boss who does what's necessary to protect what's mine. Those two can't be separated, Sienna. When you chose me, you chose both. I didn't know. You did. He took a step closer, his eyes holding me captive. Maybe not the details, but you knew. You knew, from that first night what I was. And last night, when I warned you it would get ugly, I gave you the chance to leave. But you stayed. You chose to stay. Tears burned my eyes. Because he was right. I had chosen to stay. I had chosen to witness, foolishly believing I could handle the truth of his world. But witnessing and understanding were different from accepting. I can't. My voice failed. I don't know if I can do this. The silence that followed was devastating. Dante became completely still, as if my words had frozen him in place. I understand, he said finally, and the emptiness in his voice broke something inside me. Lorenzo will take you wherever you want to go. I'll arrange protection, discreet, you won't even notice. And he hesitated, then pulled something from his pocket, a black card with golden numbers. A bank account, in your name. Enough for you and your grandmother to live comfortably, forever. Dante, I don't want your money. It's not about what you want. It's about ensuring you're safe, even if it's far from me. He placed the card in my hand, closing my fingers around it. I told you I loved you. That doesn't change just because you can't love me back. I do love you, the words escaped before I could stop them. That's why it hurts so much. Because I love you and I'm scared of what that love will turn me into. Dante closed his eyes, as if my words caused him physical pain. When he opened them again, they were shining with raw emotion. Then tell me what to do. Tell me how to fix this, and I will. You want me to leave this world? To abandon everything? His voice became desperate. I would. For you, I'd leave everything behind and we'd start over somewhere nobody knows my name, where my hands could be clean. The offer shattered me. Because I knew deep in my soul, that Dante was serious. He would leave his empire, his power, everything he had built if I asked. But what kind of man would he be without it? Who would Dante Salvatore be if you tore away the part of him that was a boss, a leader, a protector of his people? And more importantly, did I have the right to ask for that? No, I whispered. I won't ask you to change who you are. That would be just as wrong as all of this. Then what do you want from me? Time, I said finally. I need time to process everything, to understand if I can live in this world without losing who I am. Dante nodded slowly, although every line of his body screamed protest. How much time? I don't know. Days, weeks, I took a deep breath. I need to go see Nonna Lucia. I need to be with the only person in this world who has always made sense. Then go. He stepped back, creating a physical distance between us that mirrored the emotional abyss. But Sienna, his eyes met mine one last time. No matter how much time you need, no matter what decision you make, I'll be waiting, because you are the only thing in this world worth waiting. 4. 3 months later, autumn had given way to winter, and New York was covered in the season's first snow when I finally returned to Dante's penthouse. The 3 months away from him had been both endless and instantaneous. I spent them with Nonna Lucia, taking care of her as she recovered from surgery, listening to her stories about the old country, about love and impossible choices she herself had faced when she was young. Your grandfather was not a good man, she told me one night, as we drank tea in her small kitchen. He had dark businesses. He did things that kept me awake at night, terrified. I looked at her in shock. In all the years, she had never mentioned this. But you loved him, I stated, knowing the answer. With every piece of my imperfect heart. Her eyes, so much like mine, shone with memories. And he loved me. He loved me enough to gradually leave that life behind. It didn't happen overnight. It took years, but he did it. For me, for the family we built. What if he hadn't changed? She held my hand, her wrinkled skin warm against mine. Then I would have had to decide if I loved him enough to accept him for who he was. There is no right answer, cara mia. Only the answer you can live with. During those 3 months, Dante kept his word. Discreet protection, men I occasionally saw in the shadows, ensuring my safety, but no direct contact, no calls, no messages. Just an envelope that arrived every Monday, containing a single red rose and a card with 3 words in Italian. Ti sto aspettando. I'm waiting for you. And slowly, in the weeks of silence and solitude, I understood something fundamental. It wasn't the violence of Dante's world that terrified me. It was my own fear that loving someone from that world meant losing my identity. But identity wasn't a fragile thing that could be stolen. It was a choice of who you were, what you stood for, how you loved. And I chose to love Dante Salvatore, not despite who he was, but including all the parts of him, the dark ones and the light ones, the tender ones and the brutal ones. So on the first Monday of February, when the red rose arrived, I wrote my own message on the card and sent it back. I love you too. I'm coming back. Lorenzo dropped me off in front of the building, his rare smile appearing when he saw me. He's upstairs. I don't think he's left the penthouse all day, just waiting. My heart pounded as I went up in the private elevator, the 3 months of separation turning into eager anticipation. What if he had changed his mind? What if time had separated us too much? But when the elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse, all my doubts evaporated. Dante was standing near the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the snow-covered city. He turned when he heard the elevator, and the expression that crossed his face, hope mixed with fear, mixed with a love so intense it made my knees weak, said it all. You came. Back, he whispered in Italian, as if he was afraid that speaking louder would break the moment. I came back, I replied, crossing the space between us. Why? I stopped in front of him, raising my hand to touch his face. He looked thinner, shadows under his eyes suggesting sleepless nights. Because I spent 3 months trying to imagine my life without you, and all I saw was emptiness. Because you showed me the worst part of who you are, and yet, when I think of the future, it's your face I see. I took a deep breath. Because true love isn't about loving only the easy parts of someone. It's about choosing the whole person, with all their light and shadow. Sienna. My name was a prayer on his lips, but I need promises, I continued. Promise you'll never lie to me about your world, that you'll let me choose when to participate and when to step away, that you'll see me as a partner, not as a fragile thing to be protected and hidden. I promise, he said without hesitation. All that and more. You'll have your own life, your own projects, your own identity. His hands found my waist. In fact, I have a proposal. What kind of proposal? I've been thinking about what you said, about change. He hesitated. I can't completely leave my world. It would be dangerous for everyone involved. But I can evolve. I've already started the process of legitimizing some businesses. I bought a share in a legitimate import company. I established a charity foundation. I looked at him in surprise. You did that in the last 3 months? I did it in the last 3 months because a stubborn woman made me want to be better. Not a good man, I'll never be that, but maybe a better man. Tears filled my eyes. Dante. The foundation needs a director, he continued. Someone with a genuine heart, who understands what it means to come from nothing. Someone who speaks Italian and understands the immigrant community. His eyes sought mine. Someone like you. You want me to run your foundation? I want you to have a purpose beyond me. I want you to build something that is completely yours. He held my face with both hands. And selfishly, I want to see you every day, working on something that makes your eyes shine, the way they did when you talked about helping Nonna Lucia. I couldn't speak through the tears that now fell freely, so instead, I did what my heart screamed. I pulled him into a kiss that held 3 months of longing, weeks of doubt, and the final certainty that this was where I belonged. When we broke apart, both of us breathing heavily, Dante rested his forehead against mine. "Be mine," he whispered. "Not as a prisoner or a possession, but as a partner, as an equal, as the woman who made me capable of love." "I already am," I replied. "I always have been, since that first night when I answered in Italian and saw surprise in your eyes." That stubborn waitress who put me in my place, he smiled, genuine, free, transforming his face into something devastatingly beautiful. "I knew in that moment that you would destroy my world. Destroy or rebuild? Both." He kissed me again, softer this time, and I wouldn't change a thing. 6 months later, the Marcello Salvatore Foundation opened its doors in a renovated building in the old neighborhood where Dante grew up. We offered legal assistance for immigrants, English classes, professional training programs, everything that could give people a chance to win, just as someone had given Nonna Lucia a chance decades ago. Dante attended the inauguration, pride clear in his eyes as I cut the red ribbon. Surrounded by families the foundation had already helped. His world was still dark, still carried dangers that kept me alert. But now it also carried purpose, evolution, something beyond just power and control. That night, we had dinner at Bellissimo, not as a client and a waitress, but as a couple. The table where it all began was empty, and Dante had specifically reserved it. "Remember when you spilled wine on this tablecloth?" he teased, his fingers intertwined with mine across the table. "I remember when you thought I didn't understand Italian," I countered. "The best surprise of my life." He raised my hand, kissing my palm. "You know there are rumors about us, in my world." "What kind of rumors?" "That Dante Salvatore has been tamed, softened, weakened by a woman." I tensed, but he smiled. That dangerous smile that made my pulse quicken. "And do you know what I say when I hear those rumors?" "What?" His eyes met mine, dark and intense. "That yes, I was changed by a woman. But only a weak man confuses love with weakness. Only an insecure man fears that a strong partner diminishes his power." He squeezed my hand. "You didn't weaken me, Sienna. You gave me a reason to be stronger. Because now I have something worth protecting besides an empire." "And what is that?" "The future, hope, the possibility that a man born into violence can die in peace, having loved and been genuinely loved." I raised my wine glass, smiling through the tears that seemed to come so easily now when I was with him. "To the future, then," I joked. "To the future," he echoed, "and to the stubborn woman who made me believe in it." Our glasses touched with a delicate chime of crystal, sealing a promise not of perfection, but of a continuous choice. A choice to love each other through the storms. A choice to build something better together than we could apart. A choice to let the silence speak, because in all the important moments, our hearts spoke in Italian, the language of our ancestors, of passion, of a truth that words in any other language couldn't capture. And when we left Bellissimo that night, fingers intertwined, the city sparkling around us, we were no longer a waitress and a mob boss. We were Sienna and Dante, imperfect, complex,